The 1960s were a controversial time in the United States. On the one hand, the economy of the world's first superpower was thriving. Gross product growth rates have reached an unprecedented 4 to 6% each year. Democratic presidents John Kennedy and Lyndon Johnson heralded the advent of the welfare society. On the other hand, economic prosperity for many Americans has raised the bar for what their country should be like. In the two prosperous decades after World War II, the boomer generation grew up in the United States. Then this word was used to describe a generation that grew up in the prosperity of young people, educated and critical of established orders. Most boomers shared leftist views, including Maoism and Guevara's. They protested against the Cold War with the Soviet Union, racial segregation, inequality in income distribution, unequal rights for men and women, and compulsory conscription. The latter problem became especially acute for young people with the outbreak of the Vietnam War. The mysterious assassination of President John F. Kennedy in 1963 spurred hostility toward the state, customary orders, and values among American youth. The court convicted the eccentric lone shooter Lee Harvey Oswald, which many Americans thought was a lie. Therefore, the dominant trends among American youth in the 1960s were nonconformism, the desire for quick, decisive changes, and the hope for a new political force that would establish true justice for all. It was among teenagers who grew up in such an atmosphere that Californian teacher Ron Jones conducted his experiment. Jones was a young and progressive educator who was not afraid to teach children about history through unusual means. In April 1967, Ron Jones turned 26 years old. He graduated from Stanford University and worked as a history teacher in Palo Alto, California, at the Cubberley School, which was considered an advanced school with a modern approach to teaching. Jones himself adhered to left-wing Democratic views and considered himself a follower of the humanist psychologist Carl Rogers, one of the founders of humanistic psychiatry. Students respected the young and progressive Jones. He was never afraid of innovation. He brought extremely controversial guests to class, a communist or a member of the Ku Klux Klan. And they themselves told the students about their ideologies. Those who did not have Jones as a teacher were envious of us. We were proud to study with such a teacher. This is what one of his students said. On Monday, April 3, 1967, Jones taught a class on Nazi Germany and World War II to high school sophomores. The second year of high school is an educational level in the American tradition, approximately corresponding to the 10th grade in Russia. Several school children asked questions. How could the Germans submit to an obviously inhuman dictatorship and ignore the mass extermination of people? Instead of a direct answer, Jones invited the audience to participate in a week-long experiment, without directly revealing its essence, but promising the highest score to all participants. The teacher allowed those who did not want to join to study independently in the library, but for grades no higher than passing grades. As Jones later admitted, he did not have a clear and consistent plan of action. The experimenter started with a simple thing. He introduced discipline in the class, with a uniform, strict seating position at the desk and other rules. Now the students were instructed to answer the teacher only while standing, in a laconic manner, always addressing them as Mr. Jones. To reinforce this, Jones forced the teenagers to leave the classroom several times and come back in with the correct position. He hoped in vain that school children would begin to be indignant and sabotage his teams. Most of the guys obeyed with obvious enthusiasm, inspired by the orientation lecture on the benefits of discipline in any activity, from science to sports and military affairs. To Jones's surprise, measures that he considered absurd and bad only involve school children in the educational process. Even those who had previously sat quietly in the back rows now answered on par with the good and excellent students. I began to think about how my ideas about pedagogy were crumbling. After all, I preferred a free atmosphere in the classroom and maximum independence in my studies. But now I introduced authoritarian methods, and the class liked them. They immediately had an effect. The teacher was surprised by how much the teenagers liked the discipline, collectivism, and the power of a charismatic leader over themselves. The next day, Tuesday, April 4th, Jones devoted to introducing a new value to teenagers, collectivism. As on the first day, he launched into lengthy arguments that no group of people will achieve success if its members do not feel like one whole, putting the common above the individual. The audience enthusiastically accepted this thesis. Jones then had the school children chant the motto, "Strength through order, strength through community." He dubbed his group the Third Wave and introduced a special greeting for it, vaguely reminiscent of a Nazi salute. The leader continued to endow the group with new attributes, and this only made it more popular among school children. On the third day of the experiment, 13 new participants joined the original 30 Wave members. Jones introduced fixed membership in the movement and encouraged school children to involve new activists in the Third Wave. By the end of the experiment, the group consisted of at least 200 people, from loners and outsiders to school leaders, bullies and athletes. Jones tried to find something for each Wave participant to do, from developing official symbols to registering and accounting for new comrades. On the third day, students from other courses skipped their courses to come to us. On the fourth day, children from neighboring schools came to join us. I had no idea it would go this far. Developing the experiment, the leader ordered several guys to monitor internal discipline and report those who violated it. These included unauthorized meetings of participants, failure to comply with official greetings, or disparaging remarks about the Third Wave itself. To Jones' unpleasant surprise, he was informed about the real and imaginary misdeeds of his comrades not only by official ones, but also by voluntary informants. Another discovery for the teacher was that one of the class outsiders, a certain Robert, volunteered to become his bodyguard. The teenager, proud of his new status, accompanied his idol everywhere, right up to the teacher's room, where school children were forbidden to enter. The experiment was becoming unpleasant for the creator, but he understood that he could not stop it at will. It was already too late to retreat. Now I can understand why the astronomer insists on looking through his telescope again and again. I plunged deeper and deeper into the exploration of my own ideas and motives driving group and individual actions. Most of the teenagers clearly supported Jones, only 2 girls openly opposed him. Before winding down the initiative, Jones brought the experiment to its climax. On Thursday, April 6th, at the next meeting of his followers, he developed something like an ideology for the Third Wave. The teacher declared that the strength of the movement is not only discipline, collectivism, and joint action, but also pride. And the Wave members should be proud of the fact that they supposedly belong to one of the cells of the emerging Third Party, an alternative to the Democrats and Republicans. Any day now it will take shape officially and will push aside the old elites, making way for the young. On Friday, April 7th, the leader of the Third Wave assured, the national leader of their movement, a future presidential candidate in the elections, will appear on television. Jones said that outdated individualism and democracy would be replaced by a new order built on strict discipline. The Wave will change the destiny of the American people and give them a new sense of order and unity. The audience enthusiastically accepted this demagoguery. Jones's words were given weight by an advertisement one of his students read in a recent newspaper with the slogan, "The Third Wave is coming." With the silent consent of the teacher, the teenagers decided that this was a secret message testifying to the strength of their movement. The leader again reinforced his words with deeds. He named the names of several participants who had been reported by his comrades, and ordered the security service to take the dissidents to the library. Jones explained that they were expelled from the Third Wave for disloyalty. The school children meekly followed the leader's order, unanimously admitting that he was right. The participants in the experiment later admitted that, in principle, only a few people contradicted Jones. The teacher himself wrote that only 3 friends who were friends with each other did not openly accept his ideas, without naming their names. They were noticeably ahead of the rest of the class in their knowledge and grades, but with the beginning of the Third Wave, no one needed their talents. Hancock later named two of them, Alice Hess and Sherry Tousley. Both tried to disrupt the culminating Friday meeting with a general viewing of the leader's speech. But the girls' attempts did not bring results, since the majority of the class clearly supported Jones and the orders he introduced. The teacher ended the experiment with a spectacular trick, admitting that he had deceived the school children. Within a week, Jones' experiment took on a life of its own, going beyond the boundaries intended by its creator. Rumors about the third wave also reached adults, both parents of students and other teachers. Jones had to explain himself at least twice to the fathers of two students. In the first case, it was a rabbi; in the second, a military pilot who went through German captivity during the Second World War. Both times, the leader of Valna managed to explain himself. They say that this is only about studying history, and not about creating a new party with authoritarian tendencies. To avoid unpleasant consequences and for the purity of the scientific experiment, Jones deliberately distanced himself from racist and chauvinistic rhetoric. Jones received no complaints at all from his colleagues. The school director, once meeting him in the school corridor, greeted him with a smile with the wave salute. The movement's short history ended on Friday. Jones gathered several dozen band members in the auditorium and turned on the television. But for several minutes only white noise came from the screen. Then the projector turned on newsreels of the Third Reich with footage of military operations, concentration camps, and the work of the Nuremberg trials to the amazed school children. The teacher explained to the high school students that they now understood from their own example how a dictatorship works. Politicians instill in people the belief that they are absolutely right, the only justice of their ideas, and free their supporters from critical thinking. There is no leader. There is no national third-wave youth movement. You were used, you were manipulated, you were pushed by your own ambitions, and you ended up here. You are no better or worse than the Germans under the Nazis whom we studied. Years later, the students recalled that some of their comrades received the news with a smile. They say, "We knew that all this was not for real." The majority did not hide their disappointment. Some, like the guard Robert, cried. Jones hit one of the hidden nerves of the history of the Third Reich. In the 1930s in Germany, most teachers welcomed Adolf Hitler's rise to power. In 1935, about 4% of Nazi Party members were school teachers. And among the hired workers in the ranks of the Endstab they were the majority, about 25%. It was schools that became one of the foundations of the dictatorship. Under the Nazis, denunciations for any dissent, even harmless jokes, flourished in them. Any individuality was suppressed among the students. They were forced to engage in military drill, to the detriment of the curriculum. In 1935, at the Party Congress in Nuremberg, Hitler personally stated that the German boy of the future should be fast as a hound, tough as sandpaper and hard as steel. They say that the Nazis will bring out a new type of person, disciplined, firm and healthy to the core. The teaching of many subjects has become ideological. In history lessons, children were taught that Germany is historically the greatest power in Europe and the world. In biology they were reminded of the natural hostility of Jews to the Aryans, and in geography they were reminded that the borders of the German state should coincide with the area of the German people. Interestingly, the risky experiment did not affect Jones' career. But in 1970 Cubberley School did not renew contact with him for other reasons. The teacher's political views and social activity had an impact. He openly condemned the Vietnam War and supported the Black Panthers, a radical organization that advocated armed struggle against the U.S. authorities. Jones became a practicing psychologist, then found himself in journalism and creating theatrical scripts. At the end of the 1970s, he wrote a short essay about the third wave. The author of the experiment did not remember about it for a long time and even destroyed a small photo archive of the failed movement. The third wave became the basis for several theatrical productions and films. After all, a story in which a simple teacher, out of the blue, easily creates an authoritarian ideological cell of several hundred people is truly amazing. What do you think about this experiment? Write in the comments and rate this issue fairly, so that we understand that our efforts were not in vain. See you on our channel.